The following is a video tutorial for how to create your documentation sheets for your model miniature train parts. So basically what I'm looking for here is I want you to create two sheets. Your first sheet will have the parts that you see here, so the smokestack, the hitch magnet, the cow catcher, the straight track, the linkage arm, and the wheel. And on sheet 2 here, I'd like for us to place a nice assembly of the train on its own, a nice exploded view of the train and all of its parts, one isometric view of the train properly constrained to the track, and then we have, of course, we have our three pegs here, the linkage peg, the hitch peg, and the axle peg, and then lastly just a nice isometric and multi-view of the train body itself. So there's going to be a couple of new things here that we have not done before in Inventor in terms of placing down all these different types of views and all these different kinds of callouts. Also take note here that we will bring in a parts list as well, and then there are certain sections where we'll be adding text boxes for different types of notes for different types of features. So I'd like to start on sheet 1. And I'll start off with the stacks piece here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a new stack and lay down that view right next to it. Alright, and the scale here that I'm looking for is going to be 2:1. So I'm going to change that here. We're going to turn the view labels on for every single one of our parts. So we're going to turn that on right here. And then, of course, name that view with the appropriate name. So for this, it's going to be stack, and then we'll add the scale there at the end. At this point, I can also set it to shaded. I'm going to do all of my views here in shaded mode. I'd also like to take this opportunity to take a look at the Display Options tab at the top here. If you select this tab, you'll see a couple different options, most of which are grayed out. It depends on what is in the view and what you're trying to accomplish. But one thing that I'd like for you to select on every single one of your views is tangent edges. What that's going to do is give you a little bit of a better feel on paper for the three-dimensionality of your part, for fillets, curves, anything like that. So we're going to turn tangent edges on for every single one of your views that you have on your documentation sheet. Now that I have that set here, I do want a front view. If your view does not match this front view because you might have made your part differently on a different axis or plane originally, then just go ahead and select change view orientation and set yourself up with the proper view. This works for me here. I'm going to go ahead and place my front view. I'm going to then move my cursor upwards and then place the top view, at which time I will then right click and say create. So here I have my two views. Next, one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to dimension the top of this hole. So this is something that is going to be a little bit different. If we go ahead and just do a normal dimension here and grab this circle, all it's going to give us is a diameter, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what the hole feature is that we use to make that hole in the stack. So if we go and select on hole and thread and then select that same circle and drag it out, you'll see we have a bunch of more information here. So let me break that down for you. What we're looking at is a diameter for the smaller hole at 0.38, a depth of 1.5 inches, a counter bore between that smaller hole and this larger portion here, which with a diameter of 0.88 and a depth of 0.38. So that's much more detailed, but I'm just going to go ahead and right click and delete that dimension for now. It's not as detailed as this, and what we're looking at here is the tolerance difference. So if you're doing a hole and thread kind of dimension, to increase the tolerance, you can simply double click on that dimension here, and it brings up our edit hole note window. And to edit that further, you're going to want to go ahead and select precision and tolerance. And over here, what we can do is unselect, use global precision, and that makes all of these fields editable here. So for primary, that's going to be the first line of numbers. I'm going to want to increase that to 3 decimal points for both, and then as well for alternate. Just increase all of these up to 3. Just for good measure here, I'm going to go ahead and increase these as well, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll say OK again. And now you can see I have my updated numbers. So that 1.5 inches with the 2 zeros. Now if you wanted to tweak that, you can just go back into this precision and tolerance, and then for the depth for the primary number, just take it back to 2, say OK, and that gets rid of one of the zeros there. If your dimension, once you've gone ahead and selected hole and thread, does not match this, then you might have created your smokestack with 2 holes instead of 1. If you do this in that way, you'd get something that looks like, I'm just going to go ahead and edit this real quick, something that looks like, if I take out all of that information there, like this. Alright, and so to get this to look like that, what you're going to do is you're going to double click, and we're going to edit in some information here. What I'm looking for and what I can select, I have all these different values that I can put in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter in this area here, because I want to put this information for that part of the hole on the second line. To put this counter bore symbol in, you have to use the drop down menu and select counter bore. Now I'm going to go back up to the top line here, and I'm going to insert the symbol for a diameter, which is found right here. I will then insert the value for the diameter, which can be accomplished by selecting this icon here. Now I will add the icon here for hole depth from the drop down menu, and then select the hole depth icon here to add that value in. Once you have that all set, you can say OK. You can see it's added that information into here, and then of course just go back in and change your tolerance, unselect global precision, and bump all of these up to 3. But of course I can leave that one at 2 because I don't need to know that much information about that particular dimension. So that's how you get that on there. For this outside diameter here, you can simply be accomplished by going to dimensions, selecting that outer ring, and dropping that number in like so. Now for the bottom, or for the front view of our stack, there's some new things that we have not done before in Inventor. One of the things that we're going to be looking at here is a breakout view. And so to do that, what you want to do is we're going to select the view first. I will then create a sketch on that view. So I'm going to select create sketch. And you know that you've done that properly by the fact that project geometry is selectable. If you happen to just pick create sketch without selecting the view first, it assumes that you're just creating a sketch on this sheet as a whole and not this view in particular, and it won't allow you to project geometry, and that's something that you need in order to make this breakout view work properly. So I'm going to project geometry is going to be one of the first things I'm going to do. And to start us off, I'm going to select all of the horizontal lines that go across this view here. So those 4, and then I'm going to select these 3 lines on the side here. Next, what I need to do is lay down a spline tool, or a spline line. You can do that by selecting the spline tool here. And thanks to my projected edge geometry, I can now select the center point on this view. So I'm going to click once, left click once, and as you drag out here, you can see I have a line. I will then, in this area around here, left click a second time, and you can see it then begins to bend the part, and I have this option for a green check mark. This option will continue to follow me as I left click at more intervals here and increase this spline. I'm going to then just connect it to the bottom end point here, left click, and then select the green check mark to solidify that spline. If you don't do that, you happen to hit enter or escape or click off of it, the spline will disappear. So you want to make sure you hit that green check mark. Next, I can just use my line tool to fill in the rest of the profile here making sure that I am selecting the endpoints. At this point, what I can do now is just go ahead and select Finish Sketch. And now I'm going to select on the breakout icon up here. And the first thing that it asks me to do, and you can always come down here to this text box area here for the prompt of what it wants you to do next, and it says select a view. So I want to do it to this view here. Next, it says select a profile. I have a profile. It's going to be this one. And then lastly, for depth, you have to select the arrow here so that it is blue. And then the depth point will be this point right here. So you select that, say OK, and you should see a nice kind of cutaway section to that depth that we had just set using the spline line that you laid down. So that's how you get that specific kind of view there. And now we're going to fill in the rest of the dimensions. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to Annotate tab here, bring up my dimension tool, select the bottom line for this, and just make my way around the part. For the dimensions on the side here, I'd like to do something called a baseline set. This is something that you'll see all over my sheets. Definitely in this area here, this is a great example of what a baseline set looks like. Basically, you're dimensioning to all of these different intervals from one selected baseline. So in order to lay down a baseline set, I'm going to select this first line at the bottom here by left clicking. I'll then left click again at this interval here. Left click a second time, or third time rather, sorry, up here, and then a fourth time here. Now I will right click and say continue. You can see those numbers are now at my disposal. I'm going to left click to place them, and then very important, the last thing you need to do here is right click one more time and say create. If you don't do that last little piece, the dimensions disappear and it has no idea that that's what you're looking for. This point here, this dimension line actually goes through the part. I'm just going to grab that point and drag it back if it will allow me to. Perhaps not. I'm just going to go ahead and redo that one more time because I'm particular about my dimensioning. I'm going to select those lines again, left click, continue, right click to place. I can see now that that 0.25 is properly spaced off the part the way I wanted it. So it's probably better just to select the bottom line, this side line here, this line here, and that one at the top to create those lines. Now, one of the last dimensions for the stack piece is going to be this 15-degree angle. You can play around with placing a dimension with this slanted line here and any of the other lines, but you're never going to get a 15-degree angle out of what we have at our disposal from that view. So to get that, we're going to do a little bit of what I like to consider dirty CAD. And what that means is I'm going to select the view once again and then create a sketch. And I'm going to select the line tool. Actually, I'm going to project geometry here first between these 2 points. That way I can use the line tool and snap right to this point. And I'm just going to draw a line straight up at 0.125. Looks fine. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to leave that line there. I will now finish the sketch. I can then dimension between this slanted line here and this vertical line. Raise my dimension up, and that's how you get that nice 15-degree marker. Now what I'm going to do is go back in to sketch number 2 where I drew this line. So I'm going to double click on sketch 2 to bring that back up. You can see now that you're in sketch mode here by your sketch bar popping up. If it didn't pop up, you didn't double click it right, so try it again if that happens to be the case. I will now select this line, dimension it to be 0.0001, some really impossibly small value, so that that line basically becomes non-existent. Delete that 00 dimension here and then say finish sketch. So So that's basically what you're looking for, kind of a little bit of a dirty cat approach into getting that 15-degree angle. So that's how you place the parts for the smokestack. Next, I'd like to take a look at the wheel here. The wheel is basically a multi-view. We have a front, a top, a right side view, and an isometric with a cross-section view through here, an additional cross-section view that cuts a quarter through the part, an isometric view which is projected from this section view, and a detail view that you see over here that comes from this isometric view here. So one of the first things I need to do then would be to go to base and place the view of the wheel. I need to locate my wheel file first. I will bring in this one here. I will then set my view to a scale of 1 to 1. I can turn my view label on at this time and type in wheel. It will be a shaded multi-view. At this time I'm also just going to switch over to display options and turn on tangent edges. Remember at the beginning of the video I said for every single part make sure you turn them on. It helps get a lot more detail out of your view. At this point I'm going to try to find my front view first. An appropriate front view, and that is exactly what I'm looking for. Top view. So if you created your part just like how I did in the video tutorial, you should be able to select on top orientation to get this kind of view here. If that's not so, again, go ahead to change view orientation and set yourself up with a nice custom view. So for starters here, I'm going to left click one time, place the front view, bring my cursor up and select left click a second time to place the top view, a third time in this direction for that side view, and I'm actually gonna, you can see here the isometric view does not match the one that I'm looking for in the documentation already, so I will just place an additional isometric view later after I've created these here. So I'm just gonna right click at this time and select create to place those two views. So now I'll do a base again for that wheel part. Say open, and I'm looking for an isometric view that I'm not going to get from selecting anything from this list here. So I'm going to go into custom and flip this part around until I get what I'm looking for. Something right like that. So you kind of have to move your cube around. Make sure you always hit the corner of the cube to square it up. You can go ahead and say finish custom view. I will then again select shaded. Oop, clicked outside my range there, but that's okay. This is a good opportunity to show you the difference between tangent edges and not tangent edges. So for this view right here, just going to move in a little bit. If I double click on that, you can see the current detail level that it's at, and if I switch over to display options and turn on tangent edges and say OK, watch what changes. You can see much more detail in this part now. It's perfectly what I'm looking for, except in isometric views we do not show hidden lines. I currently have hidden lines showing, so I'm just going to select the style here for hidden lines removed and say OK. Perfect. Now we're looking a lot better. At this point I can go ahead and create my detail view next. So to do that I'm going to select on detail here. Again, if you want to look in the bottom corner here, there always gives you a prompt for what you should be trying to do. It says select a view. So I'm going to select this isometric view here. I will then now place my cursor about over the middle of the center of the cylinder and left click one time. And you can see now I have a circle that grows outwards and inwards with my cursor as I move it. A sizing like this would be sufficiently appropriate. I will then left click again, and you can see now I have a view here that needs to be placed. I will left click another time and place that view. So that's how you get the nice little detail view there. You would then just dimension it just like how you see in this view over here. Lastly, we need to get our cross-section views in, and then this isometric view with the quarter cut out of it. To do so, I'm going to select on section. I will then select this view here, and then I will click from the midpoint of the circle to the other side. At this point now you can see here I have a line that's kind of going around with my cursor. I'm going to right click and say continue. Now a window pops up here for section view, and you can see if I hover my cursor above the part, the lines go in the downwards direction. If I bring my view below the part here, you can see the lines go upwards, and basically that's just going to cut the part in half in either direction. At this juncture, it's going to actually be symmetrical in either case. It's going to be identical, just be flipped, but we want to go upwards. So I'm going to bring my cursor upwards and left click to place that view. I will then do that same process again by selecting on section view, select this front view here. I will start at the same point, but this time I'm going to go to the middle and then go straight up at a 90-degree angle to the top of the circle here. At that point I will then right click and continue and move my cursor out to the right and left click and place that view there. So that's how you get those two cross-section views. The next thing I'm going to do here is project from this part here straight up, and you might have to go off to the side and then you can just move it into place in a second. So I'm going to do that. Left click once, right click to create, and then I can just select that view and kind of move it into place. If I zoom in here, you can see that we don't have tangent edges on, so I'm going to turn that on. Display options. Perfect. Actually, it didn't show up here, so that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. This part is getting all of its information from the view that you projected it from. So you would actually have to turn tangent edges on in this view down here. One of the other things that we do need to turn on though while we're here is hatching. So I'm going to select that and say OK. That adds these nice hatching lines through the part like you see in the section view here and here. But so to get tangent edges to show in this view here, I need to double click on that section view there, go to display options, turn on tangent edges, and say OK. Now you can see this view has updated from that view there. So that's how you place all the views for the wheel. Now again, you can just dimension it properly like you see here. The linkage arm is a basic, front view, side view, top view kind of thing. That should be pretty basic enough for placing. One of the things I wanted to look at is it's a difference in terms of increasing in tolerance. If you do a hole and thread tolerance increase, I showed you here, you have to select on precision and tolerance, and you can change the options in there. But if you're doing just a normal any old day dimension, like say this radius that comes out to 0.91, you can see that it is here under the precision and tolerance tab where you would want to increase your values to the appropriate amount of decimal places. So for this one it would happen to be 4, and then of course say OK. If you ever place a view and then you forget, and you have to go back and change it, just double click on it, go to the precision and tolerance tab, and you can set in those values accordingly. Straight track, exact same thing as the linkage arm. Again, make sure you're using baseline set to get this kind of dimension feature here. And then of course turn on all of your view labels for every single one of your views. The hitch magnet, also another easy part, just a side view and a top view. But now that brings me to the cow catcher here. Basically it's just a bunch of, this is a front view here that you can lay down, a side view, a rear view of the cow catcher, an isometric view. This one was a custom view that I created by going to place views, base, finding the part, and then again, going to change view orientation and creating that custom view. So it's just a matter of orienting your cube in the right orientation and then bringing that view in. The only thing that's a little tricky on this one perhaps would be this section view that you see here. I'm going to create that from this view, this top view here. So I'm going to go ahead and select on section. It says select a view or sketch. I'm going to select this view here. And now all I'm going to do is simply left click one time to create my section view. And what I'm looking for here is a parallel marker to show on my right next to my cursor. And so there I have it. It's the little upside down T marker. That is what you're looking for to getting that line placed. I will left click again. At this point, right click and say continue. You can see, which direction you drag this part out will flip those lines. I want to have them going in that down and right direction, so I'll drag the part out this way. I will then left click again to place that view. Now I have my section view. If you go to grab it, you can see that it's still stuck on that top view. So what I'm going to do is break alignment right here. Select break alignment, select that view. I should now be able to drag this guy anywhere I want. Move him right next to this view down here. And now simply all I have to do is rotate this view to get it to look like this. So to do that, I can right click on the view itself, select rotate, and then it's just a matter of selecting the appropriate line. So if you select the bottom line, it flips it upside down. If you select what would be the top line, flips it the right side up. Then say OK, and now you have your nice section view. For placing a chamfer dimension, that can also be a little tricky. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to go over to the Annotate tab here. If you're doing a chamfer, you're going to select chamfer. First things first is you're going to select the diagonal and then a straight line. And now you have your chamfer dimension there. So it's just a matter of selecting the diagonal line first and then the straight line. So looking at the rest of the views on this sheet here, I think this should be perfectly within your capabilities to accomplish the rest of what we see. I'm just going to close my hierarchy here on sheet 1 and flip over to sheet 2. Again, if you can reference back to when I had made the video tutorial for how to take your assembled train and put it on the track, I had said that you're going to need 3 assembly files in order to accomplish everything here. So one assembly file that you're going to place as a multi-view for this section here. You'll need a third assembly file with just the one track piece and the train to get this nice ISO view that you see here. And then of course that third file to create the animation. To get this view here, you're going to need to create a presentation IPN file. Of course, you need to make sure that you have white space in between every single one of your parts. If you do not have white space, you need to go back to your presentation file and increase the tweaks that you had set on each individual part. In this section here, we just have a normal looking multi-view. It's just in a bit of a different way. You have our side view, front, rear, top, and then 2 alternate isometric views. Again, for every single one of these, I turned on tangent edges so you can see the detail. If you do not do that, you would not see any of these fillet edges here so clearly defined. To lay down a text box like you see here, you can simply just go to the text section here, left click once, enter in some text. You can change some of the parameters for sizing and font and all that good stuff. Say OK, and then you have your text box. So that's all I did to get this section in here. I will now just delete that. Looking over now here, basically all this stuff is pretty easy to get. For this section here, for the hex sock head, basically I created a text box with a leader line. So you select leader text, you can select one of the slants here on the hex itself, take this out wherever it needs to be, right click to continue, and then enter in your text what you needed to say. I hit cancel there because I do not need to place that again. Again, chamfer, make sure you select the slanted edge and then the bottom line. For a thread feature here, you can select thread and hole and actually select the thread itself and bring that out. If there's ever additional information and it doesn't come with the dimension right away, you can always just double click it if it will let me. So one of the last things we need to look at here is, of course, the parts list section of your documentation sheets. What we see here are also balloons that correspond with the parts list. So first things first, though, to create a parts list, you go to Annotate tab at the top here and select Parts List from the Table section here. So I'll select that. Of course, the first thing it wants us to do is select a view to create this list from. We're always going to do it from our exploded view, since those are the numbers that we're going to place on the balloons that correspond with the numbers in the parts list. So I'm going to select on this view here. I will then say OK. And then you will now see a box attached to your cursor, which you can lay down in the upper right hand corner of your sheet. So now you can see right away that there's going to be some changes that we're going to have to make to this parts list in order to get it from something like this to something like that. So first things first is we're going to double click on the parts list here and bring up all the sections that we're looking at here. And I want to get all of the columns in here in the correct order and the correct ones that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go to Column Chooser, which is this icon here. Select that. First thing I'm going to do is select description here and remove it from the list. I do not need it there. I will then check and see what's left. I need item, quantity, and part number. I have item, quantity, and part number. One thing I did do is I moved part number before quantity because I thought it made sense to look at what the part name was and then how many of them there were. So to do something like that, you can just select part number and in this section here say move up. That way it'll place it in the second column. And then I'm going to add in the rest of the fields here. So I'm going to find material, mass, volume, and designer. So here's, well, I'm actually just going to go in order. I'm going to go material and say add. Select mass and say add. Down to the bottom here for volume and add that in. And then back up to designer and add that. At this point here you can go ahead and say OK. It is now updated the kinds of columns that we're going to have in our parts list. I'm just going to drag this window out a little bit further so we can see those here. And now there's a bunch of different things that we can do. One of the things that I'd like to do is change the way that we're filtering our list. In this list here you can see I have it going from the largest mass and volumes on down. So I actually listed it out by volume because I had a hitch peg and a hitch magnet that both had a matching mass. So I thought to be a little bit more exact I could adjust my list based on volume size. So to do that you can go ahead and select sort. It'll say sort by. In this section here you can say sort by volume and leave it as ascending, so it'll give us the largest and then on down to the smallest, I believe, or we might need to switch that. Let's take a look. I'm going to say OK, and it's actually did what I hoped it wouldn't do. So we need to go back into there and say descending. That makes better sense. Now say OK. Now my list has been reorganized here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we're looking at then for in terms of sort. I got train body, the stack, the wheel, the cow catcher, the linkage arm, the axle peg, the hitch peg, hitch magnet, and the linkage peg. That is now in the order that I was looking for. At this point, if you had any of your part names that might have been a little goofy or funky, you could come into this section here and edit the text as it were and make it to say what it should say, but I wouldn't change anything else in these sections here. So go ahead and say apply and then OK. You can see my parts list is now updated to the information that I was looking for. Lastly here I can just select in this top row here and drag in these sections just to give yourself some more room on the rest of your sheet. It doesn't need all this space here to list out what we're looking at. So just size it up a little bit better, move it into place, and you should be in a good position. Last things, adding balloons. There's an auto balloon thing here, but it never works the right way, so I'm going to just do manual balloons. I'll show you one. basically you just want to select on the very edge of a part, making sure that your leader lines and your arrows don't cross over a part or anything like that. You can then left click, right click to continue, and now you have a nice balloon there. So if you follow these steps correctly, you should be able to create these two documentation sheets. So I just want to recap on that. We were going to create one file with two documentation sheets in there. In order to create a new sheet, you can just go to the Place Views tab and say New Sheet. Always make sure that you edit the field definitions down here for what we're looking for. For Sheet 1, in this section down here, I had put for the title, Model Miniature Train, and I put wheel originally, but I like for it to say Model Miniature Train Sheet 1, and then author, of course, is your name. You can type, or you can also put in the block or the hour for your class period. On Sheet 2, I have the correct name I was looking for, Model Miniature Train Sheet 2. So Sheet 1 and Sheet 2. If you elect to do the extra credit, I would like for you to put that on an additional third sheet. Lay out your curve track piece, a nice side view and a top view of that, and then of course an assembly of your curve track. And if you do any of the other extra credit, like the bumper sticker portion or the animation, you can put all that documentation on your third sheet and turn that in separately. So hopefully this video was helpful. Please feel free to like or comment, and good luck with making your documentation sheets.